All right, settle down, settle down, settle down. I probably need a drink for this one because this is going to be a ramble. I don't know exactly how long it's going to be. So forgive me if it goes too long or it goes too short. I don't know exactly what's planned. So this is going to be more or less a stream of consciousness. This is my recollection of when I came of age and the things that went on in the Black community. Even though some of this stuff actually started before I was 17, because my parents actually divorced the first time. Even though they're still together, they came together, they divorced the first time when I was like 16 years old. And there was a rash of people that did that. But I just want to talk about what the recollections of me actually watching Joe Biden. And I've always disliked his smile. I always looked like Joe Biden's smile because I always knew it was fake. And he always reminded me of these car salesmen or lawyers or, business people, man, that they smile at you with that smile just before they eat you. Just always kind of bothered me. Been around white guys like that, and that kind of smile always bothers me. Anytime I see a white guy smile that way at me, I always walk the other way because I know that he's hunting and I might be in his crosshairs, and if I don't know the dude or how to defend against him, I get out of the situation. But that's neither here nor there. I just want to, I actually played that piece from C-SPAN about the Joe Biden actually arguing for the crime bill and the draconian laws that came with it. And it kind of brought back some bad memories, to be honest with you, about what went on, as far as black men. And in that period, man, we got, I'm gonna go through the story in order, but I just want to get out the stream of consciousness, the stuff that we went through, man, from kid, man, going through the end of the gold standard, or the official gold standard, when in 71 and Nixon took us off. Even though I didn't know what it meant, we felt the effects. We had 2 oil shocks, man, with that odd and even stuff, where you had 2 Gulf oil shocks because America's dollars were no good, so the Saudis stopped taking our dollars. We had to pay for their oil and gold, and we didn't have any. And so they basically dried up the oil. And we had oil shocks, and those oil shocks affected our economy. People couldn't hire. Jobs dried up. Things were tough. A lot of economies went under, man, in the early 70s after the United States went off the gold standard. I remember going through, and it took, before the jobs actually got to the point where you can actually do something, is right, be hired, man, when the economy actually opened back up, man. It wasn't until really when it finally started opening up, 1980, 81, when it finally started to open back up. And that was under, that was when Reagan first got in. There's lots of reasons why that happened. But one of the biggest reasons that it happened is that, the Nixon and Carter actually took us under austerity measures. We don't like to think that America's ever gone through austerity measures. We always think that austerity measures by the IMF is on some foreign country someplace, right? And maybe I'll have to do something one day about this, to actually talk about austerity measures. Because we talk about it now in the EU when a country goes broke, and like Argentina or Venezuela or Brazil or someplace, or in an African country, and they have to raise interest rates, and you have to go through austerity measures, because Ghana had raised its interest rates to 17-18%. And that was, at the time was not unheard of, but unusual, right? And then harken back to the time, and I realized that I was telling somebody my first car I bought, I paid 22% interest, 1/4 of the purchase price of a new car. I think I was 21 years old, was 22% interest. And I had grown up, and that was reasonable at the time, because I had grown up where interest rates were low interest rates were 17%. And so at the time, I didn't know any difference. I thought that kind of interest rate was reasonable. But that was the austerity measures trying to get our currency back under control. And Volcker and Carter did. And that allowed Reagan to come in and do his thing to lower interest rates and open the economy back up. Well, like I said, that's neither here nor there. One day we'll delve back into that from a financial pinpoint, a financial point. And perhaps I'll have to dive into a couple of books and actually really ground myself into that finance in that particular period. Because we look at the 70s as a happy time, right? Because that's what it's portrayed as. But it wasn't. I can tell you it wasn't, because I lived it. It was not a happy time. Very unsure. But anyway, listen to the Biden and him talk about or try to sell the crime bill to the Congress, or the latest in the series of crime bills, because he talked about the other bills and the other acts that they had actually put through previous to that from 1986 on. So I remember that I was telling somebody the three strikes laws actually started in California. And I do believe in 1987, 86 or 87, where the three strikes laws actually started, before it became national, before the feds actually adopted it. So that's the kind of stuff that we lived under, where people actually went to prison for stealing a hamburger or stealing a slice of pizza. And they went to prison for life for stealing a slice of pizza in California, a so-called liberal state. But let me stop digressing. But what these draconian laws that Biden actually espoused, that he actually gathered, he didn't come up with them totally. A lot of people on the left and the right put these things together. So, Biden is not a leftist. He's not a socialist. He's as far right as a Democrat probably can go, in my opinion. But it reminded me of what happened to the black community that was already kind of reeling from the financial situation after the gold standard and the austerity measures that families were under. If you weren't in the right spot, you didn't have a really good job, or you didn't work for certain industries like defense industries. It was tough. It was tough. It was tough in the 60s. It was tough in the 70s. It was tough. And it didn't let up until, like I said, Reagan unleashed things in the 80s. But it came at a cost. It came at the cost to the black community when you just started to make some money, okay? We didn't know that the Iranian Revolution was going to bring about this kind of turmoil. And we didn't know that it was actually going to cost the black community probably its very soul. Because when the Iranians bucked, and then the United States stopped selling them parts for their planes and parts for their missiles and missile systems, and they couldn't defend themselves, right? Even though it was a revolution, they still didn't have a contractor for their defense systems. So they had to basically cut a deal. And the deal that they cut was to sell their oil and basically buy parts and other kinds of stuff and trade that so that United States could actually do what? They could actually fight a war. They could fight a war in Central America. Because at the time in 1981, man, basically in 79, when I physically saw cocaine in 70, yeah, it had to be like 79. Actually physically saw cocaine the first time at a friend's house. And I was buying something from him, and he was snorting cocaine with a partner of his. That's the first time I had physically saw it. But even then, it was expensive. I knew that half the Lakers did it. Richard Pryor did it. A whole lot of other people that were stars actually did this drug we call cocaine. And the most potent form of doing it was actually freebasing it. You could snort it, and you get a high, but you wouldn't get that impact that you did by what we call freebasing. And that was the most expensive way to do it, because you actually lost a lot of your cocaine into the vapors. So it's a very expensive habit to actually partake in. It's like only athletes and actors and entertainers could have had a lot of disposable cash could actually do this. Most black people got high off of weed and at the time PCP. Basically heroin and opioids are basically mostly it's a non-black thing, but basically it's an East Coast thing. Didn't do it here. But that was the first time I saw cocaine. It was really expensive. You only just a tiny little bit of it, man. It cost hundreds of dollars. Tiny little bit. And they treated the cocaine like it was precious. Little drabs of cocaine like it was fucking precious, right? And the first time I ever saw somebody actually mention it, even though I didn't see it, a good friend of mine, he explained how to cook it, how to turn this cocaine into rocks. And even then, it was still, for them to actually get their cocaine, they had to piece up. It still cost them thousands of dollars. They had to take their check and take parts of their check and, get 8-9 people together. And that's how they got the deal. And it would cost them thousands of dollars every couple of weeks to actually get this cocaine, rock it up, and turn it into a free-base form. That's what the rock actually does. It evaporates, so it releases the cocaine in more like a liquid or vapor, which is what freebasing actually does, which makes the cocaine more potent, especially for black people. And even then, it was in 1981. Even then, it was more of an expensive drug, and people partook in it just like they do any kind of thing, but people got addicted to it, which is really, really unusual. That was that highly addictive, where people will actually abandon their children and stuff like that for it. But it's still limited. And then one day in 1982, man, I just noticed it. One day, man, the chicks started to show up on the street, and I just thought it was just really unusual that they would just all of a sudden be populated with all these chicks getting high. And then you found out that it was crack cocaine was on the street. Hadn't heard of it. You started finding out it was on the street. Like 82, 83, started finding out it was actually hadn't made it to the street. And I couldn't understand how it got to be down at the street level. A very expensive, posh, very exclusive drug had gotten all the way down to where street people could afford it. It was just unusual to me. And then from then on, it got worse and worse and worse. Like it's like a plague just descended upon the black community. And at the time, nobody knew where it came from. And nobody could figure it out. It just one day appeared in the black community and started to just take over. And you know how drugs have their season. Even like PCP has its peaks, right? It'll peak and then it'll wash away. It might surge again, but it was nothing. It was nothing like this. This was just a torrent. It wasn't like a drug spurt or basically a posh drug or something like that, how can I say, a fad. This was a plague, and it just would not go away, and the people that were on it just couldn't get off of it. And so you had people almost like zombies starting to wander in the street. At first it was like unusual, and then it just started to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And so by the mid 80s, man, it was just bizarre. And that's when you started to learn about people actually dealing these rocks on the side. And you start seeing these rock houses or these little drug houses that what they call them. Forget what they call them, what you guys call them now. But you start seeing these drug spots just pop up all over the place. You can tell them by the reinforced bar doors that were in front, man, and all the bars that were on the windows and stuff like that. It was just a drug house, and they were all over the place. Every little section of the neighborhood had at least one drug house, and it's just like a big invasion. And right around the drug house, you just saw all these people wandering around the neighborhood like zombies, man. Especially women just wandering around like zombies, and dudes out there like bums, man, collecting cans or doing whatever they could do to scrape up some money so they can actually go, get their hit. And nobody could figure out where it come from. How did drugs get to be so cheap? So you know how it is. You start reading and articles come out, and you figure out that somehow this drug that costs $50,000 a kilo, man, all of a sudden is down to, $10,000 a kilo. And it's like, how does that happen? And then $8,000 a kilo. And people hint that this stuff is not coming in without the knowledge of the United States, but you can't prove it. Then you see little things like the United States selling the chemicals to make the stuff to Colombia and Peru, and things don't add up. Basically, this plague came into Los Angeles, started in Los Angeles, took over one of the second biggest city in the world, and not in the world, but in the country, especially the black community. Just it basically is like a scourge. It's like a plague just went through it, man, and just transformed the way that the community was organized. Okay, dope dealers, became the hot boys. They became the alphas. They became the sought after men. And the dope boys that never had anything, they wouldn't just have one woman. They would have 5, 10 women. They get them all pregnant. And basically, when they go to jail, now all these women are hitting the streets because they got no man and nobody to support their kid. It's just turned the whole black society on its head. In the midst of Reagan actually bringing back jobs and prosperity, which was a dichotomy. It had just come out of austerity measures. Just black community has just starting to get back on its feet, started making some money and doing some things. And here comes this plague. And this plague lasts from like 1981 to like almost 1994. It peaked in 92 with the riots. 91, 92 peaked with the riots. And it took us a long time to figure it out. Thank God for Dark Alliance in Gary Webb that actually opened our eyes to this stuff. But, I had heard about this stuff underground for a very long time, about the Amina airport and hearing about them flying drugs into Arkansas under the behest or under the nose of Bill Clinton. I'm not going to say that he know anything about it, but there's rumors that this stuff is being flown in and that the CIA is actually trading drug money and buying Israeli weapons and shipping them to the Contras in Nicaragua to actually defeat the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union falls in 1989, which is, they already knew that it was going to fall, but this kind of pressure actually caused the Soviet Union actually fall faster. And when it fell, then you get this, all of a sudden you get this roll up, man. You see Manuel Noriega in Panama. They go down there and get him and put him in prison. And then you have Poppy Bush, #1, talking about a crime bill. And then, you have Biden talking about crime bills and 3 strikes. All of a sudden, right after the Soviet Union fell, now they're trying to do what? Clean up this plague that they've caused. So, in my estimation, the black community got hit 3 times in my lifetime. And really, it's never stopped. In my humble opinion, it's never really stopped. The black community has never gained its footing. Right after civil rights, you get an austerity measures after you go off the gold standard. And then right after the gold standard, even though you had a war on drugs, it still wasn't as bad, okay? And then you get this plague called crack cocaine being pushed into your community because you need to basically defeat the Soviet Union. So you sacrifice the black community to do it. So black community who's just getting on its feet after the 70s austerity measures basically gets knocked for a loop with this plague called crack cocaine. And then as it peaks and is getting ready to peter out, then you start sending black men and boys to freaking jail for 20-year terms. And look, what are you saying? For a quarter's worth, you just get 5 years. If you have a quarter's worth, doesn't matter if you're selling it, doesn't matter if you're distributing it, if you get caught with it, you go to prison for 5 years. And I'm not going to tell you how many brothers got set up. How many brothers got set up and went to prison? How many crackheads that couldn't get into rehab got set up and got sent to jail, sent to prison? Because those are the people he was targeting, because he said the people that are on drugs, that have a rock in their pocket, need to get taken off the street. And that's exactly what they did. They came in, and all the problems that they had caused, the plague victims that had pushed into the black community got swept off the street and sent to prison by the hundreds of thousands. By 1996, you had 1 million black men in prison, sitting in prison. So basically, you basically did what you could over 30 years to basically destroy the black community. And you take people like Biden and you take people like Bush that knew what they had done to the black community and knew what they had to do to clean it up, which is send out Count Dracula as to clean up the blood. Here's what it is. So maybe in his latter years, he's going to make amends for the sins that he has committed, not only to the black community, but especially to black men who you sacrificed on the cross for the United States prosperity. Once again, wasn't the first time. Very beginning of this country, you sacrificed the bodies of black men for prosperity, for white people's prosperity in this country. And you did it again because you wanted to be number one. You weren't satisfied with the Soviet Union being your rival. You had to defeat your rival. And Congress said, you're not going to do it this way. We're not going to get out there and interfere in other people's civil wars. And you found a way around it. Oh, we're going to dump this into the black community, make a ton of money, and we're going to support our interests. We're going to solve our problems. We're going to do it on the backs of black people, of black men especially, because black men went to prison. Okay, yeah, the women got abandoned, and you had a lot of little stepchildren. And thank God for the psychology of black men, because believe it or not, a lot of the boomers picked these chicks up. Otherwise, it'd have been a whole hell of a lot worse. If black men at the time still didn't have that mindset to where it was okay to take in women. It doesn't matter if the baby that she had, the dude was a freaking drug dealer and he's doing 5 to 10 years. It didn't matter. To us, it didn't matter at the time. Otherwise, the black community would have been a hell of a lot worse. And then you started sending all these people to prison. And when these people got out, they had no place to go or nothing to do. Their lives were already ruined at a young age. And you dump them back in, and now we have to process all these people that have been in prison, that have this mark that's almost impossible to get cleaned up. And we have to absorb all these people back. So as they come back, you hit us again. So the black community can never really prosper, can never gain its footing, can never strengthen. And the video reminds me that if he wasn't sad when he did this is not the sleepy Joe that we see it now, the old grandpa that dodders and forgets sometimes, that doesn't have that energy. We see the young Joe Biden. We see the mid-40s Joe Biden. His hair is balding, but we see those perfect teeth flash, that grin as he's getting ready to eat you. We hear Joe Biden talk about how tough he is and how Republicans aren't tough enough, and how we need more prosecutors, and you need to put more police on the street so you can protect good white values and protect them from the plague that you started. You start the plague. You let the plague ravage and reign and consume. And then when you've got all you can or what you want out of that plague, benefits from that plague, then you want to go and then doubly punish the same people that you put the plague upon. And then 30 years later, well, less than 30 years later, you grin at us and say that, not even my bad. Is just, you don't know what it was like back then. And you deserve it because you were just, your people were just weak, and we had to do what we needed to do to clean up America, and you did. And I always wondered why black people could never get themselves together. And then you realize they couldn't. They could never get their footing. And that wasn't even including all the turmoil that America itself went through, not just with black people, not just the community. America, all of America went through austerity measures. All of America went through the first savings and loan crisis that ripped a whole lot of people out of wealth. Okay, everybody went through the downturn and after the Gulf War, and all the money got drained, and property values went down, and people lost jobs and stuff like that. Man, where the economy just went through a downturn. Okay, now you did get an uplift. That's one thing Clinton did do. Robert Rubin, whether you like him or not, Robert Rubin basically saved the United States financially by embracing technology, embracing the internet. And from 1994 to 2001, you probably had one of the greatest bull runs you've ever seen. Natural bull runs. Now, when I talk about this fake one after 2010, 2012, or even the one that's going on now. Talk about a real one. That was your last real bull run. And then the black community gets, like Nagone was saying, all the predatory loans and the what they call the ninja loans, no income, no job loans. And then the washout between 2007 and 2009, where most people, especially black people, got their wealth stripped from them. And then just like they did this time, you had the Fed and the bank step in and save themselves and save the corporations. That's where the money went. And Joe Biden knows this. Kamala Harris knows this. This stuff is still on tape. That's why Joe Biden was never really considered a Democrat. He was a centrist. Joe Biden never really hung out with Democrats. He hung out with the Republicans. He was on the judiciary that made the laws. He was on the Foreign Affairs Committee. So he knew all this stuff. He knew where all the bodies were buried. And it just reminded me about what these policies did to our people, our culture, our community that just come out of Jim Crow. Just come out of Jim Crow. You just fight your way up to the surface and they start pushing your head back down. You just get off your knees and get on your feet and they knock you back. And every time you wobble and you rock and you get on your knees and get to your feet, and then they pull the rug out from under you. And when you look back and you understand and you see this, it is hit not only history but living history, because you had to live through this stuff. I lived through this stuff, and I seen people make lots of money and lose lots of money. And I seen people, even people that made money, man, they had to fight every day to keep their wealth. I do mean fight. It was never one of those things where they could actually relax and enjoy it. Every black person that I know that had money, had to make money, man, they had to hustle every day. It wasn't that you could actually have a business and buy a company and kick back and relax and go sail on your yacht, man, and have a really good time. Every black person I know, even the person that were wealthy, man, yes, you still had to go out and fight every day. And the people that are wealthy had to fight even harder because they had to keep it. And the competition was fierce. And just listening to Joe Biden and give him that speech and see the viciousness and the aggressiveness, talking about giving out death penalties for drug dealers, giving people 5 years to have a rock in their pocket. And they did do that, and no mandatory minimums. And because the president doesn't really want to go after the people that way or that harshly, you mock him and say he's not tough enough. You don't have enough death penalty cases. You don't have enough people locked up for from 1/4 of an ounce or less than an ounce of cocaine. Basically, $25 of cocaine, as he put it, $25 of cocaine was not enough cocaine to keep you high 30 minutes, 40 minutes max. And they want to lock you up for 5 years for that. You brought in the guns, obviously, to help the dealers and the people that were in business hold their territory. And you start off, you actually ignite this cutthroat competition amongst black people, amongst young black men. The same competition that's going on in Mexico. So it's not a black thing. They knew what they were doing because this happened in Colombia. This happened in Mexico. This stuff was going on in Nicaragua. This stuff was going on in other places where these poisonous things and this poisonous system actually touched. This was happening in Miami in the 70s and early 80s. That's why one of the most popular series on TV in the early 80s was what? Miami Vice. They talked about this. Just saying that black people are dysfunctional because of what happened in the 80s and 90s, man. It's nothing close to what's going on in Mexico right now with the freaking cartels. There was in fact, when I find it, I'll pull it up. I might even talk about it. Where there was a house, and in the yard, they dug up 60 bodies in trash bags. 60 bodies in one yard where they just dug them up. We never had anything like that. Not even close. It just remind me that this stuff is intentional. Now, whether it's to destroy the black community? Because you know what? I'll say this. You would think it's hatred of black people, that they hated us so bad that they dumped us into our community just to destroy us. No, they didn't. They did it to actually further their gains, for them to make money, so they can make moves, so they can own the world. And we're just a convenient resource for them to use. They could care less about the black community. They still could care less about the black community. They don't care what they did to it. They don't care that they destroyed it. They don't care that they made the women single mothers and then complain about them being single mothers after you destroy their men and then take them away. So you destroyed another generation of men. And I don't even think it's benign neglect. It's just plain on neglect. You just don't care. They're a resource to be used. And I think for a lot of times that still is. Now, can I prove this? No. This is just my feeling, my opinion about what went on, and me putting things together. And Joe Biden just solidified it. Watching him back when he was younger and at his prime and at his best. At his best. That's the Joe Biden I remember. What you saw on that tape, that's the Joe Biden I remember, not the one now. You run that Joe Biden up against Trump, Trump doesn't have a chance. Joe Biden now is a shadow of his former self. But that Joe Biden there, he wasn't nothing to be played with. And to pretend that what he did was benign and that he did the black community a favor, you know what, I'm not buying it. It is what it is. But anyway, that's my piece. It's all in the history books. That's the way I feel about it. Remember when Jamal Thomas said that as bad as Trump is and as arrogant and ogreish as Trump could be, he was the lesser of two evils. And that's coming from Jamal Thomas, who's a lefty, a Bernie Sanders socialist lefty. And he said that. And I wanted to be shocked, but I wasn't, because he was right. Black women don't care because black women didn't have to go to prison. Black women didn't have to do anything except open their legs and accept the money that came in. And then when their guy went to prison and the money dried up, they just moved on to the next dude. That's what they did. And now they have the nerve to wag their fingers at us. And I'm gonna quote Burr here when he did a Saturday Night Live. He just said, look right here. I don't want to speak ill of my bitches, but when the atrocities were going on in the black community, with the drive-bys and the turning the black community into zombie land, you black women rolled around in the blood money and took the blood profits. Now you want to put your red bottom boots across the fence and stand at the front of the line. What you need to do is sit your asses next to us and take your talking to. Stop pretending like you didn't, because you did. And I saw plenty of men get conned into getting into that business and taking prison chances, losing, going to prison, and the doors closed on you. That chick move on to the next dude. So stop saying that black men made a choice and ruined the black community because they did this, that, and so. No. You made a choice. Them drug dealers getting all them chicks pregnant by themselves. Okay, you had to go over there and open your legs because you thought you were gonna get a piece of that easy money, and you did. A lot of them dudes that took prison chances and sold the dope money, man, they didn't come back with a 10th after they did their bids. They had to go back and do something else, drive trucks or sell whatever, right? And some of them never came back at all. So if black men have blood on their hands about this black community, guess who has the double the amount of blood on their hands, which is black women? Because like Burr said, you rolled around in the blood money and had the nerve enough to put them red bottoms over the fence and get out the front of the line and talk about I am holier than thou. Get the fuck out of here. Anyway, I'm starting to lose the little energy and patience, and I'm sure this ramble has gone on a lot further than I intended, and it's going to be a bear to edit all the little mistakes and stuff like that to make it clean and hopefully coherent. Like I said, it wasn't anything connected, and it was just a stream of consciousness. And that, like I said, looking at Joe Biden back in 1991, man, it brought back so many memories. Because I was watching C-SPAN and I was watching this kind of crap go on. And what he said when Bush wanted the crime bill passed in 100 days because first Iraq war had been won in 100 days. So that's what he wanted. In 100 days, he wanted the crime bill passed. And rightfully so, Joe Biden gave him a talking to. Stop pretending. Stop signifying. Because you know what this is. But with that, I'm going to jump off of here. This is